Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Casting Kickstart Part 14. Took a day off again yesterday. Naughty me, but yesterday was like the last day before the first work day. Well, second work day officially of the new year, but first kind of work day when everyone kind of shows up. So I had a question, and I decided to answer that today. I was going to do something else today, but I decided to answer this question instead. It won't be very long. A person's asking, okay, you got a VM, Kubevirt. I get that. I see that. Great. But how do I RDP to this VM? Great question. So this, in my case, is not a Windows VM that I created in Kubevirt. It's a Linux VM, but I installed RxRDP, which is a Linux version of RDP for ease of use. And I'm going to show what you can do to RDP in there. Now, if you remember, if you've watched every one of the parts, you'll remember in part one, for the Rocky Linux host that we're using, we installed XRDP, and we even had to remember put in the firewall rule to allow traffic in, and we were able to RDP into it. So we did the same thing on the Lubuntu, except that it's Lubuntu. It's not Rocky Linux. Doesn't matter. So we're using apt-get to install XRDP. Very simple, and the firewall was turned off anyways. But now the question is, how do I access it from outside? Because remember, Kubernetes, the networking's completely contained unless you expose things to the outside world. And we've done that in a couple of ways already. In fact, three ways, if I remember correctly. We did a very simple port forward, which is a temporary way of forwarding traffic outside, and so it can receive it as well. But that's temporary. You actually type kubectl port forward, and you can't leave that on forever, obviously, or if someone closes the terminal, it's turned off. Then we used node port, and we're using node port in a few instances. Also, something you don't want to really use in production because it uses high up ports. So for instance, let's take a look right now on our beloved Kubevirt manager, which everyone likes a lot from what I've seen from the feedback. We see here, this is a node port. See, it's on the port of the host 30,305. Node ports have to be very, very up. They're all above 30,000. And if you don't assign a port to it, it'll grab one every time it's restarted. It'll grab a different one. So it's not a production way of doing things. In a lab, okay, it's okay. We also did ingress with Kasten, if you remember. If you look at Kasten, I'm just going to the node, right? And that's because we created an ingress, okay? And I talked a bit about that. So what I want to do here, well, I could do the other methods as well, but I'm going to do a node port again just for simplicity's sake. The idea is, again, remember the basic concept. You have to expose. If the VM is created, it's just created within your Kubernetes cluster. It's not exposing everything or anything, actually. So what I did to do this is very simple. The first part, remember, we installed XRDP. Okay, that was very simple. In fact, I'll go into the VM from our Kubevirt manager. This is the way I was going into it, if you remember correctly. There we go. Okay, I'll log in. This is through the console, though. So all I did here was very simple. I simply did a sudo apt install xrdpy. Okay. Now I've already done that, so it's gonna say no need to. It's already there, latest version. But that's what I did. So it was working inside of the VM, which is great, and inside the Kubernetes cluster. So if I was using another VM within the same namespace, guess what? I'd be able to RDP to it. But from my laptop here, I'm not able to RDP to it. So what do I need to do? We're going to need to create a service again, as you remember. We're going to need to create a service, and there's a new way that we can do this. I haven't talked about this before because this is a uniquely Kubevirt way of doing it. But you could use the other ways as well, okay? But this is a Kubevirt way of doing it. So for this, I need to go to the host, and here it is. And I need to create a service. Now, normally you can use kubectl, kubectl, whatever, or K if you've done the alias. But you can also use virtctl, which is uniquely for KVM or Kubevirt. And I've already done the command. When you expose a pod, to the outside world, you need to connect it to the pod. So the service has to know, okay, it's this pod. And the way this is done is through things called selectors. Okay, now, don't want to get super complicated here, but these are basically selecting labels of entities, of pods, and then saying, okay, connect this one. That's how it finds what it wants to connect to. So here, for instance, I did a k get po, so pods now, not the VM, pods, because it's Kubernetes basic concept. Get the VMs and show me the labels. So I'm going to talk about this maybe next time, about more in depth about Kubevirt. But my VM is running because of this Virt launcher, Lubuntu VM, VG MX2, whatever the name, pod, okay? And there's 2 containers in there, but that's what is running my VM. And this has labels, because I did show labels, okay? And this label here, which is kube VMI, okay, virtual machine instance, that's really important. That's only there when the VM's running. If the VM's not running, it's not there. That label, vmi.kubevirt.io/ID equals Lubuntu VM, is the label that we want to select. So what did I do? You could have used for virtctl, and I'll show you that command, but I'll also show you what I did just my old traditional way first, is I created a YAML. You can do everything with YAMLs, right? It's all declarative. And that YAML is a normal service YAML. This kind service is a normal Kubernetes service. You could do this for any container or anything. We already did it for MongoDB. I called it VM RDP service. You call it whatever you want. I made it a node port service, so you should be familiar with that now. And here's the key element, selector. This selector here is that label here, the VMI instance. See, the virtual machine instance. That's what's tying it up to that, okay? So this service will know that it's representing that pod. And that pod contains our VM. It's that simple. And then, of course, the namespace. Never forget the namespace. It has to be in the same namespace or else we won't be able to find that pod, okay? And then the ports. Well, okay, the ports, 3389, that's standard. We know that, right? However, I had a problem, didn't I? Because, remember, in the first part of the series, we installed XRDP on our host, right? So I can RDP to the host. Well, guess what? You can't have one port representing 2 different instances of RDP, can you? No, you can't. So I had to fiddle here. How did I fiddle? Well, I made this a node port, okay, service. But instead of 3389, I made this 31389. That's all. Just made it a different port. No problems. So on that host, if we do an SSQLMP to see everything that's listening, let's go through the fun list. So these are all the things that are listening, and we can go and see, for instance, that the 33 should be there. Where's 33? Okay, there it is. That's the 33. Okay, so that is what is listening on the host. Now it's a little bit different with the service, because so remember the service is on 31389. Okay, 31389. It's not there, is it? But I know it's working. Okay, so that's a bit of Kubernetes magic. But this is what is not letting us use the same port. Now, if we didn't have XRDP installed on the host, we could have taken this port. I'd been fine. But we couldn't, because it couldn't, it was conflicting with that one. Okay, so that's the port for our host. This is the port for our VM. Okay, I created that. Let me just see. That's XRDP. Fine. Let's go back to our window here. Okay, let's clear that. So all I did was K apply, okay, and then F, and then that RDP service. Okay, now I already did that, so it's already running. So let's look at the service. K get SVC N VMS, and there's only one, and there it is. Okay, and you'll see it's a node port. That's its cluster ID inside of the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, only inside. These are the ports. That's the port on the container. Okay, on the pod in this case, which has 2 containers. And this is the port that's going outside. That's simple. So We can test this in a second. I also wanted to show you, though, the other way of doing this, which virtctl. Let me just see if I've got it here somewhere in my history, or I'll have to recreate it or get it from my notes. I'll get it from my notes. The only problem with this, though, with the virtctl command, is that you cannot pick a node port, at least on my version. Apparently, it depends on the version of the virtctl. So I just say create a node port, expose via node port. That's wonderful, except that it's going to grab any port. And that will change if I restart it. So I'll find you that command. You know what? I'll put that command in the instructions if you want to use it, but I'll put a note saying, remember, this will choose any node port, so any port for the node port, which is not very convenient, right? So it's better if you do this and you actually say, no, use this one. That means it'll always be this node port. A lot easier. Again, for production, you're not going to do that. You're going to use ingress or a load balancer. I don't want to go deep into Kubernetes networking, but you would do something different. So let's try this. So first of all, I got to log out from here. This is the Kubevirt VM. A little bit wonky in here when you try to press the, see, it gets stuck. 1 second. I want to make sure I log out. This happened before as well. 1 second. So this is in the console. The console, as I said, is a little bit wonky when you're trying to move the mouse. You got to come up here and then down. There we go. Another reason why you don't want to use the console, right? It's a little bit weird. We're now out of there. Okay, so I'm going to leave. Thank you very much. Let's go to RDP. So remember, here's my VM's IP address. I could have used the DNS name. I decided not to. And this is that port, 31389. So let's connect to it. Oh, that looks promising. Always that yellow, the warning. And I will log in. So I'm who? Lubuntu VM, I think I called the username. Or maybe it's Lubuntu. We'll find out in a second. It'll complain. Yeah, and it complains. So it's not Lubuntu VM. It's just Lubuntu. It's been a long day. Okay. And it should happily log in through RDP. There we are. We are now inside of the RDP. Now, networking in Kubernetes is no simple thing. But for instance, saying, okay, you're logged in here. Can I access something? Well, I can access the internet. We already tried that. And I can access my router, right? Yep. So that's fine. But coming back in, I had to create this service, okay? This is all done through something called the Kube proxy, which is on each node, okay? There's a special kind of like proxy on each node. It's basically IP tables doing things all under the hood. So now we have access to the VM and we're all set. So now, why not for fun? Why don't we try to contact our MongoDB? The funny thing is, though, we could have connected probably to both of them because it's a different namespace, but namespaces in Kubernetes are not segregated by default. You have to create things called network policies. So let's try both things. First, I got to remember what my MongoDB, how we accessed it. So it was just 31. Okay, let's just take this. Let's do this. Okay, so this is the outside IP address. Remember, we also exposed this. So let's try this. Look at that. And remember, this was the crazy password I couldn't remember. There we go. Oh, 1 second. Yep, I'm not going to save it. There I am. So that's going from outside. Now let's try a fun trick. So that's from outside, right? Let's go and see if we can access it from inside as well. For this, we're going to have to move outside of the VM and check out MongoDB. So kget pods. Let's look at services. So services in, I think it was Mongo. Yeah, MongoDB. So there it is. So that's the webhook service. Let me just see. That's the webhook service. So how did we created a node port service. Let me just kget ns. Let's see our namespaces. Oh, it's MongoDB demo. Somehow I had another MongoDB in there. That's interesting. So let's do the same thing and demo. Okay, and there it is. As you can see, it's the Mongo Express. This is Mongo Express from last time. And there's that port. But why don't we try to go to the internal? Okay, this is the internal one because this VM's internal. I haven't done this before. not making this up. Let's try this. And it's port 80. It works. So, but did I get the password wrong? How can I get that password? No, I didn't. Great. That was so good. This is a good example of Kubernetes networking, the differences. This is from the outside. So here it's reaching out outside of the Kubernetes cluster, then reaching back in through that node port service we've created, right? So just like my laptop. But because this VM is inside of the Kubernetes cluster, albeit in a different namespace, we can actually use the service's IP address, the internal one, and it works. Okay? That's important to remember about Kubernetes namespaces, that by default they're not secure. They segregate resources, but they're not super secure, especially when it comes to networking. You can tighten them up though. You can create network policies and say, okay, allow only from this namespace, or disallow all other namespaces, in which case that wouldn't have worked. That's a bit deeper theory, but just to show you the different ways you can get in and to get an understanding of the fact that these things are maintained within the Kubernetes cluster by default. You can't reach them from outside. All right, that's enough for part 14. Talk to you tomorrow.